In this video, we're not going to judge a book by its cover. We're not going to judge a book by its book reviews. We're not going to judge a book by the response of its fan base or its detractors. We're not even going to judge a book by taking select quotations of the original text out of context. We're going to judge the book by the stated intent of the author. And let's never forget, John Norman was a career professor of philosophy. He taught philosophy, he wrote philosophy, and then he started this side project, writing the books, the science fiction world of Gor, that increasingly took over his life as the years went on. And why? Why? What was so rewarding about this? Was it for him just a fantasy? Was it for him just a hobby? Was it the fame? Was it the adulation of at least thousands, if not millions of fans? Was it the possibility of a connection to Hollywood and at least 2 movie adaptations? What was it? What you're going to find in these interviews with John Norman is that he took himself incredibly seriously as a writer, that he was motivated not just to reach out to people and change their minds and maybe change their sex lives by sharing his fantasies with them. He really felt that he was out here trying to change the course of Western civilization. From his perspective, he was trying to save the world. I kid you not. 1996 interview with New York Review of Science Fiction by David A. Smith. Smith, the interviewer, says, "I wonder if what upsets people is not the content of the books so much as their author. After all, you were a man writing in part about the glories of dominating and enslaving women." To this, John Norman responds, "That is an important and interesting strand of the Gorean fabric, but it is only one strand. An entire world is created here with languages, cultures, artifacts, politics, religion, costuming, cooking, military strategies, weapons." Oh, he alternates between boasting about the graphically sexual, violent nature of the vision of an alternate reality, an alternate future for planet Earth that he's presenting here. He alternates between boasting about it and this very evasive, cagey, dishonest sort of reaction, right? And I give a lot of credit to this interviewer. He doesn't let Norman wriggle out of it here, right? Like, oh yes, well, dominating enslaved women, that's just one strand of the fabric. That would be like pretending it's just what happens to be on the cover, but as if the rest of the books were really concerned with, as he says, politics, religion, costuming, cooking, military strategy, weapons. Let's keep in mind, John Norman, born in the 1930s, still alive today and still writing books in the 2020s. Has he in his books addressed any of the major political issues that arose in his lifetime? He lived through World War II. He lived through the Cold War, the rise and fall of the Soviet Union, right? The rise and fall of Mao Zedong in China, all right? The end of the British Empire, British colonialism, then the emergence of new nationalistic movements, including pan-Islamism, pan-Arabism, the increasing importance of Islam in Western politics, right? September 11th and so on. He's lived through all of this. When he says he's interested in politics, religion, etc., is there any evidence of that in his books? And then on the contrary, as we're going to discuss through this video, is there evidence that he has this unique belief in the significance of relations between the genders and that our society must be transformed to reflect the true inner nature of women and the kind of relationships they secretly, inwardly want from men? That is very clearly the exclusive obsession of his books, and that's the key to his philosophical and political belief that he's doing something profoundly meaningful in making a lot of money out of some pretty sick and twisted science fiction fantasy here. The interviewer continues, I highlight this obscure issue that your books are completely obsessed with, domination of women by men exclusively, never the other way around. I highlight it because female sexual slavery seems to me such a prominent element in the novels. Lots of credit to the interviewer. Plenty of people would let him just wiggle out of this line of questioning, which is already what he's trying to do, right? And in the reactions they generate. The Gorean novels imply that women want this whether they know it or not. Norman replies, well, there are plenty of folks, such as Anne Rice, who are writing material which is far, far more erotic. Anne Rice's Sleeping Beauty trilogy is light years beyond anything I would do or even think of doing. Yet Ms. Rice is a heroine to many feminists and is published by one of the houses that refuses to so much as look at anything by John Norman. So he's being very directly asked about sex slavery in his books. And then we have another form of dishonesty and evasion where he's trying to make the issue that he's a victim of censorship by feminists. There's a lot of that material in his interviews. And I hate to say this, guys, but if what he were saying here about Anne Rice's novels, Anne Rice is most famous for vampire novels, if that were true, it would still be completely, utterly irrelevant, right? Like if Anne Rice writes sexy vampire novels, you didn't answer the question of the fact that you devoted your life to glorifying one particular type of slavery and rape. Interviewer, you are saying that Gor is an emotionally healthier society, that it's emotionally healthier than our own in the real world in the 21st century? Norman's reply, well, for example, some men in our world seem to want to hurt women. These things are incomprehensible in a Gorean world. But they make some sense in our world, a world in which natural relationships tend to be denied. A viewer that asks, denied how? Oh, you're giving him just enough rope to hang himself. John Norman leaps at the chance to answer that question. The male, cheated of his manhood, desires to inflict pain and revenge. The female, cheated of her womanhood, accepts and perhaps even desires pain, perhaps to punish herself for deserting her deepest self, right? Really think about what he's doing here. Directly, he's lying to you. He's being deceptive, dishonest, evasive, and lying. He is directly lying to you in claiming that men do not hurt women in his fictional world of Gor, all right? That is a lie. But he's also inviting you in a very real sense to blame the victim in our world. That women who are the victims of rape and sexual violence, that in fact he's suggesting we should instead feel sympathy or pity for the men because they are quote unquote cheated of their manhood and desire to inflict pain and revenge because of this sickness in our modern society that he alone, John Norman, is trying to solve. Just how much of a lie is it? Just how dishonest is it for him to say these things are incomprehensible in a Gorean world? Nobody gets hurt in his fabulous fantasy. It would be easy to imagine some other author writing a book based on their own sexual fantasy or even based on their political philosophy, which Norman is here doing, where nobody gets hurt. In fiction, anything is possible. Quote, Misogynist Manifesto. This one-star review really means zero. The book asserts that what all women, including intelligent, well-educated women, really want is to be abused, degraded, humiliated by powerful, brutal men, and shared with other men. The women begged to be sold into slavery rather than killed. You can guess what the alpha males decided. And he notes that he is a male reviewer. This is the single most sexist book I've ever read. I'm a guy, still, this entire thing is offensive and degrading to women. The ideas behind the story could have led to an interesting sci-fi take on time travel. Instead, it's mostly about rape and subjugation of women. This all sounds pretty standard, and it is, but right around page 50 is when Norman starts in with his bizarre dom-sub philosophies, so the whole story becomes murky. Before Hamilton can be sent back to the distant past in the hopes that she will join a group of Cro-Magnon men, her will must be broken by Herjelison's lackeys until she is deemed ready for the submissive slave-like existence. For the submissive slave-like existence that awaits her. Here's the old crank's explanation to Hamilton before he shoves her into a box for a one-way trip to the Stone Age. You must understand, said Hjellerson, that if you were transmitted as a modern woman, irritable, sexless, hostile, competitive, hating men, your opportunities for survival might be considerably less. Quote, "I'm a prisoner," she said, "and I want to be fucked like a prisoner. Used!" Exclamation point. Close quote. Time Slave wouldn't be a John Norman book if women didn't revel in their captivity, which brings us to the middle of the book where things get real. Brenda Hamilton, transported to an unfamiliar time, is naked and running through the forest with a leopard in pursuit when she runs into Tree, a red-blooded Cro-Magnon hunter. At page 143 is the first of many very unfortunate rape scenes in this book. Some go on for pages. None are really necessary. The next 100 pages chronicle Brenda's transformation from a caricature of a fully realized woman to a whimpering, sex-obsessed slave. Of course, this being a John Norman novel, she revels in this change and feels that she has finally become a true woman, in quotation marks. For the first time in her life, she felt the fantastic sentience of an owned, loving female. She had just begun under the hands of a primeval hunter to learn the capacities of her femaleness. Close quote. Regrettably, more than half of this novel is lent to Norman's BDSM leadings, which involve a repetitive, preachy tone because the man is literally trying to convert you. How can he say that in our world some men want to hurt women, whereas in his fictional world this is inconceivable? Frankly, how dare you, John Norman? The interviewer asks, "Elsewhere, you have made the point that Gorean society is decentralized and pluralistic. Would you want a Gorean society to actually be created?" His reply, "It seems possible that a Gorean world might be the best possible world empirically, given human realities. It would not be a utopian world." Now, apart from the obvious and important questions of morality and ethics here, like sex slavery being the ideal way to reorganize society, you wouldn't prefer to live in a world that had electricity, flushing toilets, paper, pencils, pens? Like, why would this one factor of having access to sex slaves and being in a society that normalizes this kind of rape and violence towards women, why would that one factor alone make this, quote, the best possible world empirically for human nature? The interviewer, I give him a lot of credit, presses this point that obviously John Norman has spent his whole life evading. Many people who express tolerance over people's private lives and private fantasies become militant if those philosophies are forcibly imposed on others. So this is asking the right question, the crucial question, in the most polite and tactful way imaginable. The interviewer is saying very clearly, we're not talking about fantasy. We're not talking about dress-up playtime between two consenting adults, middle-class, bourgeois, decadent people who just want to pretend to be slaves or pretend to be raping each other. We're talking about actual rape, actual slavery, and a political philosophy written by you, John Norman, that glorifies and propounds these things as the greatest possible society, the most suitable for human nature. John Norman replies, "The philosophies of statism, authoritarianism, and collectivism are being imposed forcibly on the American people by the bayonets and guns of the state." Sound a little bit familiar? John Norman's biggest secret was the extent to which he was ripping off Ayn Rand. And Ayn Rand is a terrible writer to begin with, and a terrible philosopher and a terrible economist. It's a whole other story. But if this kind of verbiage doesn't sound familiar to you, take a look at Ayn Rand or what her immediate followers and fans have to say about life in the 20th century United States of America. Ah, yes, yes, what a deep analysis of what America was like from 1980 to 2020. The American people being forced by the bayonets and guns of the state. Does this even sound like someone with a PhD in philosophy offering a critique of the life in the contemporary United States of America? But this is how he justifies his own mission to save the world, his own mission to liberate his fellow man from this repressive regime that won't let people enslave and sexually dominate one another.
dun, 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 dun.